I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall for someone like Remy. But then again, I never thought a lot of things about myself until the night we met at that underground art show in Brooklyn. The gallery was tucked beneath a vintage bookstore, all exposed brick and dim Edison bulbs that cast everything in amber. I was there because my friend Marcus insisted I needed to get out of my head after my breakup with Jennifer. I'd spent 3 months in my apartment convincing myself that love was just a chemical reaction designed to trick us into reproducing, and that I was better off alone with my books and my carefully curated Spotify playlists. Remy was standing in front of a massive canvas, something abstract and violent, all reds and blacks that seemed to pulse in the flickering light. They wore a leather jacket over a silk shirt, and when they turned to look at me, I felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. "What do you see?" they asked, gesturing to the painting. I should have said something clever. Instead, I said, "Chaos pretending to be controlled." They smiled, slow and dangerous. "Or control pretending to be chaos. I'm Remy." "Naomi," I said, and just like that, I was caught. We talked for 3 hours that night about art, about philosophy, about the difference between wanting and needing. Remy had this way of looking at the world like everything was an experience to be consumed, savored, and then released. They told me about their travels, their lovers in Paris and Tokyo and Sao Paulo, the way they believed life was meant to be felt at maximum volume. "I don't do moderation," they said, leaning close enough that I could smell their cologne, something dark and woody. "If something feels good, why not pursue it completely? Why not drown in it?" I should have heard the warning in those words, but I was 28 and tired of being careful, tired of following rules that had only ever led to safe, boring relationships with safe, boring endings. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who loves complex, real stories about desire and consequences. Your support means everything to Sapphic Whispers. For the first month, being with Remy was like living inside a firework. Everything was intense, immediate, electric. They'd text me at midnight to meet them at some secret restaurant where the chef only cooked for 12 people. We'd spend entire weekends in bed, ordering takeout and talking about everything and nothing. Their hands always moving, always touching, like they needed constant sensation to feel alive. "You make me feel real," I told them once, and they laughed. "Baby, you make yourself feel real. I'm just the mirror." But mirrors can be deceptive. I started to notice the way Remy's eyes would drift when we were together, scanning the room for the next thing, the next high, the next experience. The way they'd sometimes see miles away even when they were inside me, like they were chasing something I couldn't give them. I noticed the pills first, little orange bottles in their medicine cabinet that didn't have prescription labels. When I asked, Remy shrugged. "Just something to take the edge off. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I started paying attention to patterns, the way they'd be euphoric one day and nearly catatonic the next, the way their hands would shake sometimes in the morning, the way they'd need 3 drinks just to feel normal. "I'm a pleasure addict," they told me finally one night when I confronted them. We were in their apartment, rain hammering against the windows, and they looked at me with something like defiance. "I never hidden that from you. I chase what feels good. That's who I am." "There's a difference between chasing pleasure and running from pain," I said. They laughed, bitter. "You sound like my therapist." "You have a therapist?" "Had, past tense." They poured another drink. "She wanted me to be someone I'm not, accept mediocrity, settle for balanced. I'd rather burn out than fade away." I told myself I could handle it. I told myself that love meant accepting someone fully, darkness and light together. But loving Remy was like trying to hold water in my hands. The tighter I gripped, the more they slipped away. They started canceling plans, missing dates. I'd show up at their apartment to find strangers there, people I'd never met, all of them high on something, the air thick with smoke and sweat, and the kind of laughter that sounds like breaking glass.
"Join us," Remy would say, pupils dilated, beautiful, and terrifying. And sometimes I did, because I was afraid that if I didn't keep up, I'd lose them completely. I tried their pills, their powders, the things that made colors sharper and skin more sensitive and time elastic. For a few hours, I understood. I felt what Remy was always chasing, that sense that everything mattered intensely and nothing mattered at all simultaneously. But the crashes got worse. The mornings after felt like dying, and I started to see that Remy wasn't just pursuing pleasure, they were fleeing something, some deep, unnamed wound they kept trying to numb with sensation. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My sister said I wouldn't reach 3,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me prove her wrong, that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Sapphic Whispers, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. The turn happened on a Thursday. I'd come over unannounced, worried because Remy hadn't answered my texts in 2 days. I used the spare key they'd given me during one of their expansive, generous moods, back when they were love-bombing me with promises and presents and words that felt like prophecy. I found them on the bathroom floor. For a horrible, eternal moment, I thought they were dead. But then I saw their chest moving, shallow breaths, and I was on my knees beside them, phone in my hand, calling 911 with shaking fingers. The paramedics came. The hospital happened in a blur. Overdose, they said. Not intentional, probably, just miscalculation, the kind of thing that happens when you're mixing substances, when you've built up tolerance, when your relationship with pleasure has become a relationship with oblivion. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. Marcus came, brought coffee I couldn't drink, held my hand while I cried. When they finally let me see Remy, they looked small in the hospital bed, all that dangerous charisma stripped away, leaving just a scared person who'd been running for so long they'd forgotten what they were running from. "I'm sorry," they whispered. And here's where the turn happened for me, because I realized sitting there in that sterile room with machines beeping and fluorescent lights buzzing that I had been so focused on saving Remy that I'd lost myself. I'd been drowning in their chaos, calling it love, calling it passion, calling it anything but what it was, codependency dressed up as devotion.
Remy's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'll change. I'll get help. You've said that before." My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. "And maybe you mean it right now, but I can't wait around to see if this time is different. I can't make myself smaller and quieter and more convenient while you figure out if you want to live. So you're just leaving when I need you most?" And that's the thing about pleasure addicts, about people who are so consumed with their own sensations that they can't see anyone else clearly. They don't understand that needing someone and destroying them aren't mutually exclusive. "I'm leaving because I need me most," I said, "and staying here is killing me too, just slower." The aftermath was brutal. Remy texted, called, showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m., promising they'd changed, they'd gotten clean, they'd found a new therapist. And maybe some of it was true, but I knew that their recovery couldn't be about me, and my recovery couldn't be about them. I blocked their number, I moved apartments, I started seeing a therapist of my own, unpacking why I'd been drawn to someone who treated themselves like a theme park, all thrills and no substance, designed for maximum sensation with no thought to sustainability. You were trying to save them because you couldn't save yourself from your own pain. Their chaos was louder than your grief about Jennifer, about your father, about all the ways you felt invisible in your own life. She was right. Remy had made me feel seen, but only because their spotlight was so bright it burned everything it touched. That kind of visibility isn't love. It's just another form of consumption. 6 months later, I saw them at a coffee shop in the West Village. They looked good, healthy even, sitting with someone new, laughing at something on their phone. I felt that old pull, that muscle memory of desire, but I also felt something else.
Relief that I wasn't the one sitting across from them anymore, wondering when the next crisis would hit, when the pleasure-seeking would tip into destruction again. They saw me too. Our eyes met. They lifted their hand in a small wave, tentative, almost apologetic. I nodded back and kept walking. If this story resonated with you, please like and share it. These stories about desire, addiction, and the complicated ways we love need to be told. Subscribe to Sapphic Whispers for more stories that explore the messy, beautiful, painful reality of human connection. Here's what I learned from my first encounter with a pleasure addict. Some people are always chasing the next high because they can't bear to sit with themselves in stillness. And you can love them, genuinely and deeply, but you cannot save them. You can only decide whether you're willing to drown alongside them or save yourself. I chose myself, and it was the hardest, best decision I ever made. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed, if my love could have been enough to anchor them, to give them a reason to choose stability over sensation. But that's fantasy thinking, the kind that keeps people trapped in toxic relationships, waiting for change that never comes. The truth is that Remy was always going to be Remy, brilliant and broken, magnetic and destructive, seeking pleasure because pain was too heavy to carry. And I was always going to be someone who needed more than intensity. I needed consistency. I needed someone who could sit in the quiet moments without needing to fill them with artificial ecstasy. I'm dating someone new now. Her name is Sophia. She's a librarian, steady and kind, and she thinks before she speaks. Our relationship doesn't feel like a firework. It feels like a candle, warm, sustainable, something that can burn for years without consuming everything around it. Sometimes I miss the intensity of being with Remy, but then I remember the cost, the way I became a shell of myself, the way I was always bracing for the next disaster, and I'm grateful for the quiet, boring, beautiful stability of loving someone who loves themselves enough to take care of the body they live in. My encounter with a pleasure addict turned on me in the best possible way. It forced me to look at my own patterns, my own addictions to chaos and intensity. It taught me that sometimes the most radical act of love is walking away, that you can care about someone and still choose yourself, that healing isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about having the courage to leave. Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, challenged you, or made you think about your own relationships differently, please subscribe to Sapphic Whispers. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with intensity and addiction in love. Let's keep telling these stories that matter, these truths that are hard to speak but necessary to hear. I still think about Remy sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep. I hope they found what they were looking for, or better yet, that they stopped running long enough to realize they were enough without the pills, without the chaos, without burning through people like they were just another substance to consume. As for me, I'm learning to sit with myself in the quiet, to find pleasure in small things, morning coffee, good books, Sophia's hand in mine while we watch terrible reality TV. It's not the kind of intensity that makes you feel alive in that dangerous, desperate way. It's better. It's real. It's mine. And that's worth more than any high could ever be.